Hey folks, it's International Master Casa Corley here. In this video, I'm bringing to you another game in the Great Games series. This one was played in 2005 between Veselin Topalov, Bulgaria, former FIDE World Champion and former World Championship contender, and Ruslan Ponomariov, another FIDE World Champion, another player that was at the top of his game in the 2000s. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So Topalov opened with d4, as he typically did in those days. Knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, and b6, the Queen's Indian defense. Not as big as popular a weapon these days, but in the 2000s, this was all the rage. And actually, the line you're going to see in this game was played a lot. And Veselin actually had a lot of experience playing against it with the white pieces. There were actually many games of his in this line. He often opted for g3, as he did in this game, and you fianchetto that bishop on the long diagonal, you get it to g2, and then staring at the rook on a8. And bishop a6 was the move that was played a lot, and it was played here. These days, most players actually go for bishop b7. It's a little bit more solid. You'll get some of the reason for that in this game, but actually, after bishop a6, what they did at the time was they played b3 most of the time, and Topalov actually went for that as well. These days, most players go for queen c2, and you see this line, this pawn sacrifice line a lot, where you go c5, d5, e takes d5, and c takes d5. And white is actually offering a pawn. In this particular position, you can't take it because after knight takes d5, there's a deadly queen e4 check. And that's a double attack on the knight and the king. And if you block with the knight, then the rook on a8 is hanging. So that's not very good. But what you do see a lot is bishop b7 back, hitting that pawn on d5 again. And then white actually usually plays bishop g2 and gives up the pawn. And then you see knight takes d5, castles, and this is I drew some arrows here because this is actually what you'll see these days a lot, where white will argue that the compensation for the pawn is really good, you get a lead in development, and it's actually a really dangerous position for black to play, honestly. So, but at those times, that was not really what was going on. Most people were going b3, and Veselin did the same. So we have b3, bishop b4 check, hitting the king on e1. Because the b3 move was played, you can't block with the knight anymore on c3. So white actually blocks with bishop d2. And after bishop d2, you have this move bishop e7. And the argument, it's kind of weird. Why would you go bishop b4 and then back to e7? Well, the argument was that the bishop on d2 is slightly misplaced. And so you kind of provoke the bishop to come to d2 because it usually would prefer to be on b2 when you play the move b3. That's a little opening nuance for you, but maybe you could use it in your own games. So anyway, knight c3 happened, castles, and rook c1. Unusual move to play rook c1, because you might say, well, why aren't you finishing your development? Why aren't you playing bishop g2? Why aren't you playing something on the king's side? And well, Topalov had some different intentions, and we'll see that a little bit ahead. So after rook c1, black played c6, and here white actually opted for e4. And c6 is a very provocative move. The reason being is because basically white can take the whole center with e4, and so you'd think, wow, why not d5? Well, this kind of demonstrates why rook c1 was played, because if d5 was in the cards and was actually played, now after c takes d5, e takes d5, you see the rook actually looks really sensible on the half-open file looking at that c7 pawn. So in some way, the rook c1 move was designed against black playing for d5. So a little more nuance there. So because of that, black actually went for c6, basically saying that if we play for d5, I might actually take with the c pawn instead of the e pawn, not actually giving a kind of a potential weakness on the c file. So anyway, after c6, Veselin went for e4, and black played this move d5, and now it's about to pop off because there's massive tension in the center right now, and white has some real decisions to make. So Topalov starts with e5, hitting that knight, Ponomariov plays knight e4, moving the knight and actually having it move into the center where it's actually going to be defended by the d-pawn. So playing a move like knight takes e4 doesn't make a ton of sense, because after d takes e4, there's a double attack on the knight on f3 and the queen on d4. So instead of taking on e4, Topalov went for the very logical bishop d3, adding more fuel to the fire here, adding another attacker on that e4 knight. And Ponomariov decided to trade it because it's hard to keep it there now, and played the move and knight takes c3. And after knight takes c3, we'd had bishop take, excuse me, I was going to say bishop takes c3. No, we had rook takes c3. And this is actually the start of a very, very unique plan, because why rook takes c3? Why putting the rook on c3 when it kind of potentially splits your rooks later? It doesn't, it feels a little bit awkward there. But let's see this plan in motion, because after rook takes c3, Ponomariov played c5. And here's where it just starts to pop off. So get your popcorn ready, get the tea, get whatever you need, because you're about to see a flurry of kind of wild moves, and this is actually why I chose this game. So Topalov started with the move d takes c5. These days, the computer actually doesn't love this move, but it's pretty logical to me. The pawn d4 is a little bit loose. You didn't want to recapture with the knight on f3 there, so you release that tension. And then b takes c5 was played. And now it's about to pop off. Topalov played the move h4, and this is not, your everyday h4. Because in 2005, when this game was played, we simply did not have h4 type of moves being played that much. This is an alpha zero style move being played in 2005. And this is the thing I kind of loved about Topalov's chess, is because it was so forward thinking. It was so revolutionary at the time. Nowadays, we see the h-pawn move a lot, but at that time, it was not like that. But there's a real threat already with this move. And I'm going to give you a moment to think on it. What actually is white threatening? So let's say that black plays a passing move like d takes c4. Not quite a passing move, hitting the bishop on d3. Now you actually have this Greek gift idea with bishop takes h7 check, and that's the idea with this h4 move. After king takes h7, knight g5 check, it's just a wrap. Because if the king goes back to g8, queen h5 threatens checkmate on h7, and it's just impossible to parry. You move the rook, you get checkmated on h8 like that. If you take this knight, you see the other idea of the Greek gift with h4, which is after h takes g5, the rook and the queen are lined up to give mate on h8, and there's no escaping it, because if you play a move like f6 or f5, g6 basically entombs that king and leads to mate very, very shortly. So because of that sequence with h4, you simply cannot ignore this threat. Bishop h7 is in the cards. It's a clear and present danger. And so Ponomariov tried to address that clear and present danger by playing the move h6. Essentially now the point is that bishop h7 can just be captured, because there's no Greek gift if the king has the shelter of the h-pawn. In particular, now if knight g5 check, the black king can just go back and ignore the knight so that the file doesn't open and the queen doesn't come to h5 with check. So because of that, after h6, Veselin continues the attack in a different way. And again, this is just incredible. So we're just going to appreciate the beauty here, because he plays the move bishop b1. And again, I gotta give kudos. I gotta golf clap. I gotta, have some animations, because bishop b1 is a really incredible move saying, oh, no, we're getting to that king. And the idea is we're bringing the bishop back here so that the queen can come to c2, and there can just be a battery on that diagonal headed toward h7. So again, clear and present danger that black has to deal with. Ponomariov played the move f5. This actually turns out to be a losing move. You could see that bar jump, but it's not so easy to defend this position, and we're going to forgive Ponomariov for playing it. The move that the computer actually wants, I think, is knight d7. And the point is that if you get queen c2 now, after f5, you can actually recapture with the knight on f6 after en passant, and it's defending the h7 square. But that being said, this is still a very, very dangerous attacking position with lots of possibilities for white. Just to give you one example, bishop takes h6 precipitates a massive, massive mess where you can't actually even take that bishop because the queen would then come into g6. So still a mess, still a very difficult position to defend, but knight d7 would have been a little bit better than f5 was. So anyway, f5 was played. Ponomariov elected to play it a little bit early, and Topalov took en passant because you want the lines open. You want those diagonals open. That's a bad diagonal I just drew. There we go. You want those diagonals open for these bishops here pointing at that king. Bishop takes f6 was played, and this rook on c3 is attacked. And does Topalov deal with that rook on c3? Does he move the rook? Absolutely not. He plays the move queen c2, which again, we're going to get a lot of that this game because, again, you're giving up this rook for a bishop, but really what it's about is the attack. And again, Ponomariov can't take it. If you play bishop takes c3, you actually can take on c3 right away, and it's actually really strong because you're threatening queen h7 and queen takes g7 checkmate, buttressed by that bishop on c3. So black would have to shut that diagonal down by playing d4. And after queen h7 check, king f7, queen g6 check, this king is just getting hunted down. If you bring your king back to g8, there's actually knight e5, and this knight now controls the f7 square, the queen controls the h7 square, and you're just not getting out of this alive. And if the king walks further out into the middle by playing a move like king e7, well, then there's this beautiful knight takes d4. It looks like there are these pieces hanging. The knight on f3 is hanging, the bishop on c3 is hanging. But the point is that actually this king is really exposed, and queen takes g7 check and bishop b4 check are real issues. So if you take that knight, queen g7 check, you start off with that, rook f7, bishop b4 check, pushing this king away from defending the rook, king e8 trying to stay tethered to that rook, and then queen g8 actually ensuring you win that rook because you can't block on f8, and that would essentially be all she wrote. Two bishops, open position, weak king, a lot of pawns. You know the drill. That's a game over. So because of that, you simply cannot take the rook on c3. And that is why in this position after queen c2, Ponomariov tried to shut it down by playing d4, attacking the rook on c3 with a pawn. And this is actually even more annoying for white because you might say, okay, am I really going to give up the rook for a pawn? And, if I give this check on h7 right away, the king can run. Where do I finish? How do I finish this off? How do I actually win this game? And, Topalov just, the way he played chess was only forward. And, it's just super cool. He played the move. You ready for this? Knight g5.
Bruh.
Knight g5. What is knight g5? What is knight g5? All your pieces are hanging. The rook on c3 is hanging. The knight on g5 is hanging. And yet still, taking that rook is not possible because d takes c3 leads to queen h7 checkmate. That's easy enough to see. And, right now you have to address this knight on g5 because queen h7 is mate. So because of that, black has to take the knight. But taking that knight means that the h file is going to be opened up as well. And so black played h takes g5, trying to keep it together like that. If you're going to take on g5, might as well take with the pawn and not the bishop. But after h takes g5, white is a piece down with the rook hanging, but there are just so many threats here. Queen h7 is a threat. G takes f6 might be a threat. It's just really, really dangerous. So, and also objectively winning. So not only is it really an incredible attack and looks difficult to survive, it actually is not possible to survive with best play. So black played the move d takes c3. Might as well take the rook, right? You've taken a knight. Now might as well take the rook, get as much material as you can, and try to survive. And again, a really kind of calm move. You'd think, okay, you're down a lot of material at this point. I need to do something fast. And Veselin plays the move bishop f4. Bishop f4. What's going on here? So what's the idea? Well, the idea is that if black passes, right, and plays a move like knight c6, now I'm going to come in with a series of checks. Rook h8 check. Incredible move, because you can't take king takes h8 because queen h7 would be mate. And if, after rook h8, if the king goes to f7, then queen g6 check, and then the king will go to e7, then g takes f6 check, and the attack just continues, and it's not going anywhere. So because of that, you can't ignore those threats. And bishop f4 just says, I don't have to rush. I have enough with this battery. I have enough with the rook on h8. Even the g-pawn is going to be a healthy participant. That's enough to knock him dead. So Ponomariov now, put on the high shoes, put on the running shoes, and played king f7, trying to get out of there because, you got to at this point. And Topalov had to go in and continue that attack. So he started with queen g6 check. Simple enough. Hit the king. King e7 is played. Let's get some material back. G takes f6 check. Now we're only a rook down. But, the attack continues. Rook takes f6 was played. Queen takes g7 check. Another check. Again, the king is getting hunted down. Can't go to d6 because the bishop is controlling that square. If you go back to e8, rook h8 is actually checkmate, and that's like a nice little ladder mate. Okay, there's one more move, but we've all seen this pattern before. Actually, I actually love this checkmate even more, bishop g6, just showing the ferocity of all the pieces there. But, after queen takes g7 check, you got to block with the rook. That was played. Bishop g5 check, hitting that king on e7, trying to push it away from the defense of this rook. And now king d6, and this is maybe a tricky moment because you want to take the queen, but you can't because your own queen is hanging. So you got to make a really important decision here. And there's actually only one winning move, which Topalov finds, which is just to give up your bishop on g5 and actually just take the rook on f7. And that's not obvious. But the point is that after queen takes g5, which was played by Ponomariov, now there's a move here that's kind of like the coup de grace of this attack. So I'm going to give you a moment to try and figure out what the move is. What do you think the move is? Well, the move was actually not a move like bishop e4 trying to go for the rook, or definitely not castling, which actually looks kind of cool, actually castling to try to bring the rook into the attack, but not that way. But instead playing rook h7. Rook h7, folks. And the point is that queen c7 is actually a checkmate in one threat. And even though this king on e1 is a little exposed, black just has the queen in the game to give it checks, and it's just not enough. And so if you play a move like queen d2, this was not played, but if you play a move like queen d2 check, king f1, okay, that's one check. Queen d1 check, that's another one. King g2. And then you're pretty much out of useful checks. There's no way the queen can get somewhere annoying. If the bishop comes to b7, the queen will snap it off. And let's not forget, queen c7 is actually a checkmate threat. So because of that, black actually played queen e5 check, trying to potentially defend the c7 square after this white king move. So king f1 was played. And after king c6, now you see these squares are actually covered on the seventh rank. Every square is protected by a black piece. So it's not checkmate yet, but there is a checkmate here, or something close to checkmate that wins the game. And of course Topalov finds it, and it's actually the very subtle queen e8 check. And the point is that you don't want the king to run. So if the king now goes back to d6, you actually have queen d8 check. King goes to c6, and then bishop e4 check, distracting this queen. This king has nowhere to go. And after queen takes e4, then queen c7 is actually mate. So basically the point is that the king now, after queen e8 check, has to step to b6 because of the issues with stepping to d6. So king b6 was played. And now you do not let that king run. If this king got to b4, We might have a very different story if it zigzagged to the b2 square. You might have a different type of game. But instead, there's the elegant and simple queen d8 check. And the point is that the king cannot run to b7, can't run to a5, and has to go back to c6. And then the final move of the game, which I think folks that actually were watching the last 30 seconds will understand, is the move bishop e4 check, distracting that queen so that queen c7 is actually a mate. And so if queen takes e4, queen c7 is checkmate. And that didn't happen because after bishop e4, Ponomariov actually resigned. This was an incredible game. Like, I cannot explain to you how beautiful this is. Topalov actually has a number of beautiful games in the Queen's Indian where he attacked like this, and it's games like this that are why the line actually fell out of fashion with this, very modest bishop a6 and then c6 and d5. It's just a little passive for and it gives some good chances to the attacking aggressive player that Topalov was. But let's just get a little instant replay here, right? Because we had this position where h4 was played early on. There was a rook on c3 and h4 was played. No intention of castling. Greek gift galore. And, insisting on attacking with bishop b1, en passant, and then queen c2, d4, and knight g5. And you have all these pieces hanging, but it's all about getting to that king. And, it was beautiful. So, anyway, we had a beautiful attack. We had our little king hunt, our little king walk, and all the pieces participate in the attack. And, that's usually how the good attacks tend to go. So with that in mind, maybe you can, consider, playing in that aggressive style yourself, and I'll bring you another video soon enough. All right. Take care, folks. Peace.